Have you ever felt the ground shift beneath your feet in the middle of an ordinary moment? You're standing in your kitchen, folding laundry, stirring soup, living your regular Tuesday, and suddenly everything you thought was solid turns to sand. Maybe you've caught a look between two people that made your stomach drop, or found a receipt that didn't make sense. A text message that arrived too late at night. That moment when the story you've been telling yourself about your life starts to crack, and you realize you've been living in a house built on secrets. It's terrifying, isn't it? The not knowing. The wondering if you're crazy for questioning. The fear that if you pull one thread, the entire fabric of your world will unravel. But here's what I've learned from the hundreds of stories we've shared in this space. Sometimes the truth, no matter how painful, is the only thing that can set you free. Sometimes the note you weren't supposed to find, the secret you weren't meant to discover, is actually the key to understanding why you felt so lost for so long. Today's story is about a woman who put her baby to sleep one ordinary evening and stumbled upon a piece of paper that would shatter everything she believed about her marriage, her husband, and the life they'd built together. But it's also about what happened next, about the courage it takes to face a truth that terrifies you, about the strength you didn't know you had until you absolutely needed it. If these stories speak to your heart, if you've ever felt that ache of knowing something isn't right but not having the words for it yet, I want to invite you into our family. We're building something beautiful here, a space where forgotten voices matter, where the truth isn't something to fear, but something to honor. Every week we share stories that remind you you're not alone, that your feelings are valid, that the secrets we carry don't have to define us. Subscribe and become part of our community. A place where we don't judge the messy middle of someone's journey, where we celebrate the courage it takes to open the drawer you've been avoiding, to ask the question you're afraid to hear answered. We share these stories because we believe in the power of truth, in the resilience of the human heart, in the possibility that even when everything falls apart, you can build something stronger from the pieces. You belong here, and we can't wait to walk this journey with you. Hit that subscribe button and join us. But before we dive in, tell us where are you watching from. We love seeing our global family in the comments. The house was finally quiet. Emma stood in the nursery doorway, watching her 6-month-old daughter's chest rise and fall in the soft glow of the nightlight, that gentle rhythm that had become the soundtrack to her new life as a mother. Lily's tiny fist was curled near her cheek, her rosebud lips slightly parted, completely at peace in a way that made Emma's heart ache with a love so fierce it sometimes scared her. She pulled the door closed with the careful slowness of a bomb technician, avoiding the squeaky hinge she'd been asking Marcus to fix for weeks now, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. The baby monitor crackled softly in her hand as she walked down the hallway, past the wedding photos that lined the walls, past the framed print that said home is where your story begins, past all the carefully curated evidence of the life she thought she was living. The kitchen was a disaster. Bottles crowded the counter, their caps scattered like confetti from a celebration no one had enjoyed. Burp cloths draped over the back of chairs. A pot of something that was supposed to be dinner sat congealed on the stove, abandoned hours ago when Lily had started screaming and wouldn't stop. Emma filled the sink with hot water, squirted dish soap with more force than necessary, and plunged her hands into the suds. This was motherhood, she thought. Not the Instagram version with the soft filters and the sleeping babies in flower crowns. This was the bone-tired, touched out, covered in spit-up, haven't showered in 2 days version that no one prepared you for. The version where you loved your child more than your own heartbeat, but sometimes stood in the pantry eating crackers and crying because you couldn't remember the last time you felt like yourself. Marcus was working late again. 3rd time this week. Maybe 4th, she'd lost count. He'd texted around 7. Honey, sorry meeting, running long, don't wait up, love you. And she'd stared at those words on her screen, feeling something she didn't want to name. Not anger, exactly. Not suspicion. Just a hollow kind of loneliness that had been growing steadily since Lily was born, like a shadow that got longer as the sun set on her old life. She told herself this was normal. New parents struggled. Everyone said so. The first year was survival mode. You just had to get through it and things would get better. But late at night, when she was the only one awake, feeding Lily in the darkness. She sometimes wondered if Marcus missed his old life. If he resented how much everything had changed. If he looked at her now, with her unwashed hair and milk-stained shirts, and saw someone he didn't recognize anymore. She was scrubbing a bottle when she heard it. A faint buzzing from somewhere in the living room. Marcus's laptop sitting open on the coffee table, where he'd left it this morning in his rush to get to work. The screen was still glowing, casting a blue light across the couch. Emma dried her hands and walked over, intending to close it and save the battery, when she saw the notification pop up in the corner of the screen. A message from someone named Sophia. Just a preview. A few words visible before it faded, but enough to make Emma's breath catch in her throat. Can't stop thinking about last night. Her hand hovered over the trackpad. She shouldn't look. She knew that. Privacy, trust, all the things you were supposed to honor in a marriage. But her fingers were already moving, clicking, opening the message thread before her conscious mind could object. And there, filling the screen, was a conversation that made her knees buckle. Messages going back weeks. No, months. Sophia's words in gray bubbles. Marcus's in blue. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible. I miss you already. This is getting harder to hide. When can we meet? I'm counting the hours. Emma sank onto the couch, the laptop burning hot against her thighs. She scrolled up, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears, past messages that got progressively more intimate, more detailed, more impossible to misinterpret. There were no explicit photos, at least none in this thread, but the words painted pictures vivid enough. Secret meetings. Hotel rooms. Lies he told her, excuses she believed. Working late. Client dinner. Conference out of town. Every single one a cover story for time spent with this woman whose name Emma had never heard before tonight. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely control the cursor. She kept scrolling, looking for something, anything that would make this make sense, that would reveal this was all a misunderstanding, a prank, a nightmare she could wake up from. But the evidence just kept mounting. And then she found it. A message from 3 weeks ago, right after Lily's 4-month checkup. The one Marcus had missed because of work. Marcus, I feel terrible about missing the appointment. Emma sent me photos of Lily getting her shots, and I wanted to be there so badly. Sophia, you're a good dad. But you deserve to be happy too. You can't keep sacrificing everything for a marriage that isn't working. Marcus, I know. I just don't know how to tell her. She's so overwhelmed with the baby. The timing feels impossible. Sophia, there's never a perfect time. But we can't keep living like this. I love you. Marcus, I love you too. The laptop screen blurred as tears filled Emma's eyes. She closed it quickly, as if shutting the device could somehow unsee what she just read, unfeel what she was feeling. But it was too late. The truth was out, loose in her living room, impossible to stuff back into whatever dark corner Marcus had been hiding it. Her husband, the man who'd promised to love and cherish her until death do us part, the father of her baby sleeping peacefully down the hall, was in love with someone else. Had been for months. While Emma was waking up every 2 hours to nurse their daughter, bleeding and healing and losing herself in the fog of new motherhood, Marcus had been building a whole other life with a woman named Sophia. Let me pause this story for just a moment, because if you're watching this, I have a feeling you know exactly what Emma's feeling right now. That moment when everything you believed about your life, your partner, your future, just shatters into a million pieces. When you realize the person sleeping next to you has been living a double life, and you had no idea. Maybe you found messages too, or smelled perfume that wasn't yours, or caught a lie that unraveled into 100 more. I know this isn't easy to talk about. I know the shame that comes with admitting you didn't see it, the fear of what people will think, the way it makes you question your own sanity and judgment. But here's what I've learned from our community of truth seekers. When one person finds the courage to say, "This happened to me too," it gives someone else permission to finally breathe again. So if this story is touching something deep inside you, if you've ever discovered a betrayal that changed everything, would you type in the comments, "I survived the truth"? Add anything else you want to share. your story, your pain, where you are now. Because I promise you, someone scrolling through these comments right now needs to know they're not the only one whose world fell apart in an ordinary moment. Your words could be the lifeline they've been searching for. Thank you for trusting us with your truth. It takes courage to be seen. Now let's continue. Emma sat in the dark living room for a long time, the baby monitor silent beside her, the house holding its breath around her. Part of her wanted to scream, to throw things, to call Marcus right now and demand answers. But a larger part, the part that had been honed sharp by 6 months of survival mode motherhood, knew she needed to think, to be smart about this, to not react from the raw wound of discovery, but to plan her next move carefully. She thought about Lily sleeping in her crib, innocent and perfect and completely dependent on her parents to not destroy her world. She thought about the mortgage on this house, the joint bank accounts, the intertwined life she'd built with Marcus over 5 years of marriage. She thought about how she'd ignored little signs over the past months, small moments that hadn't quite added up but that she'd dismissed because she was too tired, too overwhelmed, too trusting to question. The way he'd started showering as soon as he got home from work, the new cologne, the sudden interest in going to the gym, the phone that was always face down now, password protected with a code she didn't know, late night texts he'd quickly hide when she walked into the room, weekend work trips that seemed to multiply after Lily was born. She thought he was just adjusting to fatherhood in his own way, giving her space with the baby, maybe struggling with the transition like she was. She'd been so consumed with keeping their daughter alive and fed and healthy that she hadn't looked up long enough to see her husband slipping away into someone else's arms. Emma picked up her own phone with trembling fingers and opened her text thread with her sister Rachel. But she couldn't find the words. How did you type out, "I just found out my husband is cheating on me"? How did you make that real by saying it out loud? She locked the phone and set it down. Not yet. She needed to be certain. She needed more than a message thread before she blew up her entire life. But even as she thought it, she knew the truth. You don't tell someone you love them in a text message unless you mean it. You don't talk about leaving your wife unless you're seriously considering it. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was an affair, an emotional and physical relationship that had been going on right under her nose while she'd been too exhausted and trusting to see it. She stood up, her legs unsteady, and walked back to the kitchen. The dishes were still waiting in the sink, the water gone cold and greasy. She pulled the plug and watched it drain, wishing she could wash away everything she'd just learned as easily. But some stains don't come out. Some truths, once known, can't be unknown. She dried her hands and walked down the hallway to their bedroom, the room she'd shared with Marcus since they'd bought this house 3 years ago. Everything looked the same. The rumpled duvet, his side of the closet stuffed with work shirts and khakis. The framed photo on his nightstand of their wedding day, both of them grinning like idiots, so young and stupid and sure their love would last forever. Emma opened the nightstand drawer, not sure what she was looking for, but compelled to search anyway. And there, tucked under a stack of old magazines and charging cables, was a small notebook she'd never seen before. Her hands shook as she pulled it out and flipped it open. Marcus's handwriting filled the pages. Not a journal exactly, but notes, plans, a whole secret architecture of lies laid out in blue ink. Hotel reservations with dates and confirmation numbers, restaurant names, a list of excuses he'd used, check marks next to the ones that had worked. And at the back, loose and folded, a printed email. She unfolded it carefully, like it might explode. It was from Sophia, dated 2 months ago. The subject line read our future. Emma forced herself to read every word, even though each sentence felt like a knife sliding between her ribs. Sophia had written about her hopes for them, about how much she loved Marcus, about how she understood he needed time to figure out how to leave his marriage, but that she was getting impatient, about how she knew Emma would be devastated, but that sometimes you had to hurt people you once cared about in order to be authentic to your true self. The email ended with a plan. After the holidays, Sophia had written, "We agreed after the holidays you'd tell her. I'll be waiting. I love you enough to share you for now, But not forever. Emma sank onto the edge of the bed. The notebook and email spread across her lap like evidence at a crime scene. After the holidays. That was next month. Marcus had apparently already decided he was leaving. He'd made plans with his mistress about when and how he'd destroy their family. He'd probably been rehearsing what he'd say, how he'd phrase it. Maybe he'd already consulted a lawyer about custody arrangements for Lily. Maybe he'd picked out an apartment to move into. Maybe he'd been living in their marriage like a ghost for months, going through the motions while his real life, his real love, existed somewhere else entirely. The baby monitor crackled and Lily's small cry filtered through, not fully awake yet, but stirring, probably needing her pacifier repositioned or her blanket adjusted. Emma stood on autopilot, put the notebook and email back exactly where she'd found them, and walked to the nursery. She picked up her daughter, breathed in that perfect baby smell of lotion and milk and pure innocence, and held her close. Lily settled immediately, her tiny hand curling around Emma's finger, her warm weight solid and real against her chest. This baby, this perfect little person who'd only been in the world for 6 months, and had no idea her family was splintering apart. Emma would protect her from this. Whatever happened next, however this ended, she would make sure Lily was loved and safe and never, ever made to feel like she was the reason her parents couldn't stay together. She put Lily back in the crib once she was deeply asleep again and stood there in the soft glow of a nightlight, watching her daughter dream. Emma had changed since becoming a mother. She'd lost herself for a while in those early weeks, drowning in exhaustion and hormones and the overwhelming responsibility of keeping another human alive. But she'd also found strength she didn't know she had, a fierce protectiveness, a clarity about what mattered. And standing there in her daughter's nursery, with the evidence of her husband's betrayal burning in her mind, Emma made a decision. She wasn't going to fall apart. She wasn't going to beg Marcus to stay or compete with Sophia for his affection. She wasn't going to shrink herself or blame herself or wonder what she could have done differently. Because the truth was, this wasn't about her. This was about Marcus making a choice. A series of choices. To lie. To cheat. To build a relationship with another woman while his wife was home with their infant daughter. To plan an exit strategy with his mistress while Emma was struggling through the hardest transition of her life, believing her husband was her partner in all of it. And now that she knew, now that she'd seen behind the curtain, she had to make her own choices. She walked back to the bedroom and quietly packed a bag. Not for herself, for Marcus. If he wanted to leave so badly, if he'd already made plans with Sophia to start their life together after the holidays, then Emma would simply move up his timeline. She folded his clothes with steady hands, added his toiletries from the bathroom, zipped the bag closed. Then she took the notebook and the email from his nightstand drawer and placed them on top of the dresser, where he couldn't miss them. She grabbed a notepad and pen from the kitchen and wrote 3 sentences in her clearest handwriting. I found everything. The messages. The notebook. The email. Your bag is packed. Don't come home tonight. We'll talk about Lily and what happens next when I've had time to think, but I need you to understand something. I am not going to be the woman who begs you to stay. If you want to be with Sophia, go be with Sophia. But you don't get to keep me on hold while you decide. You don't get to pretend you're committed to this family while planning your escape. Choose. And live with your choice. She left the note on his pillow, propped against the headboard where it would be the first thing he saw. Then she checked on Lily one more time, locked the front door, and curled up on the couch with a blanket. She didn't cry. Not yet. The tears would come later, she knew. The grief and the rage and the bone-deep sadness of watching a marriage die. But right now, in this moment, she felt something unexpected. Something that surprised her with its intensity. She felt powerful. Because for months she'd been sleepwalking through a life that was slowly killing her. Too exhausted to see that her husband had already left even though his body was still in the house. Too trusting to question. Too consumed with motherhood to notice she was being betrayed. But now she knew. And knowing, terrible as it was, gave her agency. She could make decisions from a place of clarity instead of confusion. She could protect herself and Lily. She could stop living in Marcus's lie and start building her own truth. Whatever that looked like, however hard it would be, she'd survived childbirth. She'd survived the 4th trimester. She'd survived endless sleepless nights and the complete dissolution of her old self. She could survive this too. She would survive this. Because that's what mothers did. They endured the unsurvivable. They found strength in places they didn't know existed. They protected their children and rebuilt their lives and came out the other side transformed. Emma pulled the blanket tighter around herself and listened to the sound of Lily breathing through the baby monitor. Steady and sure and trusting. That's what she had to be now. Steady. Sure. Worthy of that trust. Marcus had made his choice months ago when he started texting another woman. When he booked the first hotel room. When he told Sophia he loved her. Now Emma was making hers. She was choosing herself. Choosing Lily. Choosing a future that might be uncertain but would at least be honest. A future where she didn't have to wonder if her husband was lying every time he said he'd be home late. Where she didn't have to compete for attention with a woman she'd never met. Where she could look at herself in the mirror and know she'd done the hardest thing, the right thing, the thing that honored her own worth. It was almost midnight when she heard Marcus's car in the driveway, his key in the lock, the door opening quietly because he thought she'd be asleep. She heard him set down his briefcase in the entryway, heard him walk through the house toward their bedroom, heard the moment he found the note because everything went silent. She waited, her heart pounding, wondering if he'd come out to the living room, if he'd try to explain or apologize or deny. But he didn't. She heard the bedroom door close, heard drawers opening and closing, heard the sound of the bag she'd packed being picked up, and then she heard the front door open and close again. The car starting, the engine fading down the street. He'd made his choice, just like she'd asked him to. And even though it hurt, even though her chest felt crushed and her throat burned with unshed tears, Emma knew she'd done the right thing. She'd refused to be a placeholder, refused to accept breadcrumbs of attention while another woman got the full meal, refused to model for her daughter that love meant accepting betrayal and disrespect and lies. This was the inheritance she'd give Lily, not a perfect intact family, because that was already broken whether Emma acknowledged it or not. But the knowledge that her mother had loved herself enough to walk away, had been brave enough to face the truth, had chosen difficulty with dignity over ease with dishonesty. The tears came then, hot and fierce and long overdue. Emma cried for the marriage she'd thought she had, for the partner she'd believed Marcus was, for the life they'd planned together that would never happen now. She cried for Lily, who would grow up splitting time between 2 homes instead of 1. She cried for herself, for the exhausted new mother who'd been betrayed when she was most vulnerable, who'd given everything to their family while her husband was giving his heart to someone else. She cried until her chest ached and her eyes were swollen, and the sky outside started to lighten with the first hint of dawn. And then she got up, splashed cold water on her face, made coffee, checked on Lily, who was starting to stir, ready for her morning feeding. Emma lifted her daughter from the crib, settled into the nursing chair, and felt Lily latch on with that familiar tug that still amazed her 6 months in. This tiny person, this perfect miracle, the best thing that had come from her marriage, even if the marriage itself couldn't survive. She stroked Lily's soft hair and whispered promises into the quiet morning. "I've got you. We're going to be okay. You are so loved. Nothing that happens between your dad and me changes that. You will always, always be loved." The days that followed were strange and hard and clarifying all at once. Marcus texted that evening asking if they could talk. Emma agreed, but insisted it be during Lily's nap at the house, with clear boundaries about what she would and wouldn't discuss. When he showed up, he looked terrible, guilty and exhausted, and like a man who'd been caught in a lie he'd never expected to be uncovered. He tried to explain, to minimize, to blame the stress of new parenthood and the distance that had grown between them. Emma listened without interrupting, and when he was done, she said 5 words that ended the conversation. "I want a divorce, Marcus. He tried to argue, suggested couples therapy, promised he'd end things with Sophia, said he'd been confused and stupid, but he loved Emma. He loved their family. He wanted to fix this. But Emma had spent days thinking about what came next, and she knew with absolute certainty that she couldn't go back, couldn't unknow what she knew, couldn't trust him again even if he begged. Because it wasn't just the cheating. It was the planning. The notebook full of lies. The email about their future. The way he'd looked at Emma for months, knowing he intended to leave, but pretending everything was fine. That kind of betrayal didn't heal with apologies. It revealed character. And Marcus had shown her who he was. The divorce was messy, but mercifully quick. They agreed on joint custody, on selling the house, on splitting assets with minimal fighting, because neither of them had the energy for a prolonged battle. Marcus moved in with Sophia within a month. Emma moved into a smaller place across town, closer to her sister. With a nursery, she painted herself in soft yellows and greens. She started therapy to process the betrayal and the grief. She joined a support group for single mothers. She learned to ask for help when she needed it, to accept that she couldn't do everything alone, that building a new life required a village. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, Emma began to heal. She started to recognize herself again in the mirror. Not the girl she'd been before marriage and motherhood, but someone new, someone stronger, someone who'd been tested by fire and come through it still standing. She watched Lily grow and change, hitting milestones that made Emma's heart swell with pride and grief all mixed together because Marcus wasn't there to witness them. But she also felt grateful. Grateful that Lily would grow up seeing her mother as someone who chose self-respect, someone who didn't settle, someone who showed her daughter through actions, not words, that you teach people how to treat you by what you're willing to accept. A year after that terrible night when she'd found the messages, Emma was cleaning out a closet in her apartment when she came across the bag she'd packed for Marcus. He'd apparently grabbed a different one and left this behind. She almost threw it away without looking inside, but curiosity got the better of her. She unzipped it and found his clothes, toiletries, and at the very bottom, folded small, the note she'd written on his pillow. He'd kept it. The evidence of the moment everything changed. Emma read her own words again. I am not going to be the woman who begs you to stay. And she felt a surge of pride in that version of herself. The Emma who'd been shattered but refused to shatter. Who'd been betrayed but refused to beg. Who'd chosen the harder path because it was the honest one. She threw the bag away, note and all. She didn't need to hold onto that anymore. It was just paper, just cloth, just the physical remnants of a past that no longer defined her. What she carried now was different. It was Lily's laugh, the friends who'd rallied around her, the knowledge that she could survive what she thought would destroy her, the certainty that she deserved better than what Marcus had given her. And maybe someday, when Lily was older and asked hard questions about why her parents weren't together, Emma would tell her the truth in an age-appropriate way. She'd say that sometimes people make choices that hurt the ones they love. That her dad wasn't a villain, but he wasn't a hero either. He was just human and flawed, and he'd made mistakes. And most importantly, she'd tell Lily that her mom had loved herself enough to walk away, and that was a kind of strength worth learning. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories are waiting for you. Click to keep watching, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that the hardest truths can lead to the most beautiful transformations, that betrayal doesn't have to break you, and that sometimes the note you find is the catalyst for becoming exactly who you were meant to be all along.